Let's give it up for all the nominated authors. All right, this is a very special event because of the authors are here and they're nominated. So welcome to the Alice Mackay Room. My name's Jorge Amigo, and I'm the head of cultural programming here at VPL. Thank you for spending this lovely evening with us. I know some people are competing with hockey, so if you need to sneak in your phone and watch a score, it's fine. We'll hear your reaction. So this is the third Incite event of 2025. So let's give it up for the Writers Fest. We're very grateful to the Writers Festival for this partnership, which brings some of the most exciting writers in Canada here to this stage. So before we begin, I want to remind us that we're hosting this event from the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh. I'm an immigrant from Mexico, which means I feel a particular responsibility to continuously learn about the ongoing effects of colonialism in this part of the world and to integrate that knowledge and that work into my work as a public servant here. And for me, that means taking a curatorial approach that centers Indigenous authors, artists, stories, so that our stages help advance reconciliation. Now, June is National Indigenous History Month, and we have an incredible lineup of Indigenous-led, Indigenous-themed programs, like author events, concerts, even a rooftop concert actually happening this Saturday, and film screenings. So please take a look at our website, and you can see a listing of all these events happening. So on that note, a quick show of hands, who has never been to this space before? Okay, just a handful of you, great. Who is very familiar with VPL events? You think, okay, half of you, most of you, okay, great. For those of you who've never been here or are not very familiar, my team hosts about 120 events a year, a lot of them on this space, but we also host concerts and art performances and dance performances and screenings and everything all over the building. So I want to plug one thing that is coming up that we just announced. The whole month of July, we're going to have a series of Thursday jazz concerts. So every single Thursday on the rooftop, we're going to have a jazz concert. So please come. Yeah, it's going to be great. So Thursdays, 2 to 3 p.m. Ben, who's standing over there, is a curator. So if you want to learn more about the bands that are playing every Thursday here in July, you can talk to Ben. And there's also a poster over there so you can see the names of the bands and the groups coming up. So before I pass it on, quick reminders, if you've never been to this room, the bathrooms are located right outside this room to the right. One favor, if you need to exit or enter the room, please use that door over there in the corner. This door we're going to try to keep closed simply, I mean, it's not closed, but please don't use it because it's very noisy for people on stage, so use the one in the back. It's also not the ballet, so you can come in and out as many times as you want. Cell phones, make sure your cell phones are not making noise during the event, so please either power them down or silence them. If you feel like sneaking in a photo or a quick video, totally fine. Just tag us if you upload it on social media. We love knowing that you came to a library event. So now it's my pleasure to pass the torch to Megan Cole, who is the Interim Executive Director of the BC and Yukon Book Prizes.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. And I need to thank everyone who's joining us online because there are folks watching the live stream. I'm delighted to be here again at the Vancouver Public Library. I think this is our fourth year doing an event in this space. There was one Incite back in the old days of Zoom events that we did. And that was actually the first time we were able to showcase all 5 Jim Deva authors, and I'm excited to be able to do that again this evening. Thank you so much, Jorge, for your introduction, and a big thanks to all the folks at the Vancouver Writers Fest for supporting what we do at the BC and Yukon Book Prizes and for helping make this event possible. So this evening we're celebrating the 5 books shortlisted for the 2025 Jim Deva Prize for Writing That Provokes. This is the 5th year we've awarded the prize, and given everything happening in the world around us, it feels vital and very lovely to gather with all of you to celebrate these amazing, inspiring, and provocative books. Jim Deva and his partner, Bruce Smyth, who support this unique prize, stood up to censorship in 1985 when books were being seized at the border for being deemed obscene. I'm not sure if this sounds familiar in these days, but it sounds like it's all coming back. Jim, Bruce, and their store manager, Janine, took their case all the way to the Supreme Court. The BC and Yukon Book Prizes are honored to be able to help continue Jim's legacy of upholding and safeguarding dignity and respect for all. So now I'm going to, one at a time, introduce our 5 wonderful authors, and I'm going to start by introducing Carleigh Baker. Carleigh is a Nihio Apitaukosi-san Icelandic writer who lives as a guest on the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh. Her work has appeared in Best Canadian Essays, the short story Advent Calendar, the Journey Prize Stories. She also writes reviews for the Globe and Mail and the Literary Review of Canada. Her debut short story collection, Bad Endings, which was published by Anvil in 2017, won the City of Vancouver Book Award and was also a finalist for the Bill Duthie Bookseller's Choice Award. Carleigh, will you join me on stage? Yes.
Hello. I'm not very good at holding a mic and reading at the same time, so I will take the podium. Even though I've noticed since having the Rona 4 or 5 times, sometimes I get a little lightheaded when I have to stand and read at the same time. Okay. How are we doing? How's this? This is good? Okay. I'm really grateful to be here. And this is a really cool prize. This is a real honor to be nominated for this prize, and I'm really excited. I'm grateful for Megan, who flew all the way over to be here today. And I'm honored to be in the presence of these fabulous writers. And I won't go on too much about that because I only have 7 to 8 minutes. But so suffice to say, thank you. If you don't mind, I wanted to start by saying I have been dying to tell people why I wrote this book, et cetera, et cetera. And now that I have the opportunity, I feel a little bit nervous. So if you don't mind, I would like to do something that is maybe a little bit like I'm trying to sell you my 13 steps to, but I'm not. Perhaps I will sell you my book at the end of this, but if you wouldn't mind, anyone who wants to take a breath with me at the beginning, because I am also about to talk about what a mess the world is right now. So if you're willing to just take a breath with me, breathe in. Oh, not into the mic. Thank you. Now I'm going to stand back a little bit so that I don't pop my peas. I started writing. This is my book that's up for the award, Last Woman, and it's published with McClellan and Stewart. And I started writing Last Woman. We were asked to sort of talk about a few things about why we wrote the book. And I started writing Last Woman. It's actually, some of the stories are years old, but I started putting it together because I was fueled with a white hot rage. I was so angry about everything, and it sort of came together during the pandemic. And remember when that was the only thing that we had to worry about? And I was so angry. I was angry that COVID existed, and I was angry that at a lot of humanity's response to it, and I was angry at myself because I just felt that no matter how much research I did and how much I wanted to sort of solve what a stupid thing to think that you could solve the problem, but I think sometimes you feel like maybe you could, maybe you can crack the code. I couldn't. And not only that, I actually, and I joke about this, so feel free to laugh if you want, I did actually take to my bed. I took to my bed for 3 months. And I had a grant, so thank you, Canada Council, for allowing me to take to my bed for 3 months, and ordered Uber Eats and didn't do a damn thing. And I was angry at myself, and I was just a mess. And I was supposed to be working on a novel that wasn't going anywhere. I didn't do a thing, and so that's what happened. And then Brian Kaufman at Anvil Press got in touch at a point where I was like, I'll never write another word in this town again. and said, hey, do you want to write a story for us? Can I commission you to write a story for us? And I said no, because my first response to everything is no. And I thought about it, and I was like, well, maybe I can, and maybe I will. And when I got started writing again, all of a sudden, I remembered. So weird, too, because you would hope as a writer at a certain point you would just remember this, but I find I keep forgetting. I don't think I'm alone in that you do have a voice, and that I do have a voice, and I could do something. And I will just quickly say that I don't think it's enough for a fiction writer to just write fiction. I think we have work beyond that, which is to protest and to write letters. But the writing of the fiction that I felt was responding to the world allowed me to feel a bit empowered again. So I did. So that's what I did. And I started writing. And so this book is what's it about. There's a lot of isms in it. Ageism, as I worried about my aging parents, late-stage capitalism, feminism, institutional racism. There's a lot of isms in it. That's what the book is about. And why did I start writing about it? Well, I had to deal with the anger, and some folks are really good at like outrage. Some folks are really good at that. They feel outraged and they channel it into action. And I am not very good at it. When I let anger really sort of inhabit my body, it splinters and it gets really silly. And all of a sudden I'm angry at everything, including strangers on the internet. And I have spent a long time being really angry at strangers on the internet, whilst knowing that some of them are purely there to try to make me feel angry, not me specifically, and some aren't even human, some are bots. And so I'm going to read a little bit from the beginning and the end, from a story called Outraged on Your Behalf, which I wrote with the idea that, because I was starting from anger, which for me is not righteous, I was going to own all the stupid conversation on the internet. I was going to write a story that was people were going to read it and be like, haha, I too think all of internet discourse is stupid, And I got into it, and as I wrote, two things started to happen. I started to develop empathy, not for the bots and not for the trolls, but I started to understand that I guess below anger for a lot of folks, for folks who are arguing in good faith, sometimes is fear. And I also started to develop some empathy for myself. And that has always been a big problem with me, is that I think that I need to handle the state of the world by punishing myself, which doesn't get you very far when you're trying to be creative. So that's my response to that. How does it provoke? We were also asked to talk about. I think the best way that I can provoke is to try to help folks maybe shed some tears, which you probably won't do this evening, I won't get into that, and to have some laughs. So that's my job. I'm better at that, at trying to help folks sort of maybe purge some of that. And so that's what I hoped this book would do. Thank you for listening. Now I'm going to read some stuff. This is Outraged on Your Behalf. I'll just read a little bit of the beginning and the end. And I'll just take another breath first myself. Thank you for those who took a breath with me. It's Wednesday. The office has AC and a hanging string of beads plant that cascades to the floor. There are deadlines, but you're scrolling, ready for anything. Photoshop, somebody says in the comments section below a photo of Bob Dylan goosing Jack Kerouac. Undergraduate poets will argue about it for days. In Myanmar, an aerobics instructor named King Hin-wai records a workout in the capital city and accidentally captures the first few moments of a military coup. She never breaks stride while black armored vehicles roll in behind her. For 3 days, the video was everywhere. Today, you find it on YouTube. Fake, Trickdiddle 93 posts. Look at the shadows behind her. This post gets 700 upvotes and a hearty discussion on the cost of motion capture. Hanhet Ko identifies himself as Myanmarese and assures the comment section that this is real, and King Hin-wai records a fitness show every day in this location, until the coup, that is. He gets no upvotes. In minutes, the comment is lost in a landslide of speculation on how, exactly, green screens work. The context of the story isn't important to the scroll daddies, as you call them. It's the opportunity to argue endlessly in search of the one truth, an exercise that requires so many takes they deserve a biological group name. An embarrassment of takes, maybe, though the on the nose of it leaves you dissatisfied. No, you say out loud to break the spell. Reading the comment section only frustrates things. The woman in the cubicle next to you cocks an ear in your direction, but you ignore her. You need to revolutionize the system, change the game. Which game is still unclear because they all need changing. You type, "We need to do something about," and pause. After a while, you find a tweet about workplace equity that seems juicy and read what others are saying about it until the hashtag fire season takes over your feed. Pictures of that apocalyptic sunrise no digital camera ever gets right, a maraschino cherry in a shot of dishwater. The photos are coming from all across the province and into the States. California, where it burns so hard every summer, Mom says it's a wonder there are any celebrities left. But it's your province burning this year. Lightning strikes, careless smokers. In the last 8 hours, a fire at Tetley Creek has jumped the highway and burned through 70 hectares in the direction of your hometown. And that's accurate. My parents live in Merritt. The regional district map is dotted with cartoonish markers that look like flame emojis. So the fire continues, the parents come down, and the protagonist is, a couple of things, is confronted with the fact that in spite of being around my age, let's say, she lives in a one-bedroom apartment and she can't help her parents. She can't host, she can host them, but it's gonna be uncomfortable. And this is the best that she's been able to summon at age above 40, let's say. So she's feeling that, and part of it is also sort of a trip back in time to camping trips that she used to take with her parents when she was younger. Northern California marked a halfway point for summer. After 2 weeks at Trinity Center Campgrounds of America, all that was left was to retrace steps. A more adventurous family might have cut inland into Nevada on the way back, or even Utah and up through Idaho, crossing the border into the Kootenays. But your parents chose sameness, the return to each campsite like a homecoming. The last summer your family drove the coastline was still a decade before the fires made camping too dangerous. That year, at the Trinity KOA campground, things changed. Driving down the steep hill into the site, you could see that the lake was a mint green. A billboard at the entrance warned about rinsing off powerboats before launching them to reduce the speed of Eurasian water milfoil, but it was too late. The invasive plant had completely taken over. Wading in for a swim meant slogging through feathery tentacles that wrapped around your calves. Even at 10 years old, you were savvy enough to know that nothing threatening lived in the lake, but as soon as the bottom was obscured, it was hard to be sure. Masks and snorkels were discarded in favor of an air mattress so you could float above the vegetal darkness, wondering what lay hidden in the swirl. Mom refused to go in at all, sitting at the campsite all day with her feet in a bucket of water. Some afternoons, you and the campground kids rode bikes around and scavenged for treats. Your mom kept Twizzlers in the tent, but everyone knew the families with RVs had popsicles and Revelos in the freezer. Once the source was secured, you dropped the bikes and ran to get in the receiving line. That last summer at the Trinity Center KOA, the same summer the lake turned green, running at top speed for an RV popsicle, you slipped. The fire pit was only smoldering a little, but your hand went in up to the wrist. It happened in that slowed motion of childhood accidents. There was no pain, only the certainty that you were in trouble. In a flash, somebody's mom had you over her shoulder and into the RV. She turned on the cold water for the bad hand and put a popsicle in the good one. Well, you stood there, disembodied, awed by the splendor of a stranger's RV. She sent the campground kids to locate your parents. And then that woman came in and looked at your hand and told you it was going to be okay. Hugged you until your own mother arrived. She seemed mad, the way she always did when you were clumsy, and only as an adult would you understand that fear looks like that sometimes. Thank you.
Do I have to turn it on? Thank you so much, Carleigh. As I was sitting here listening to you talk and read, I was getting the sense that in this room right now, it feels like a bit of a balm for what's happening outside all these walls. It's nice to be able to just, be angry and be okay with it and share these moments. So thank you for that, Carleigh. And thank you to all of you, because I know there's more wonderful words to come. Our second reader is Billy Ray Belcourt. Billy Ray is from the Driftpile Cree Nation in Northwest Alberta. He won the Griffin Poetry Prize for his debut collection, This Wound is a World. He has twice been nominated for the Governor General's Literary Award, once in poetry for the debut and in nonfiction for his memoir, A History of My Brief Body. Both his works of fiction, A Minor Chorus and Coexistence, were national bestsellers. He is an associate professor in the School of Creative Writing at the University of British Columbia. Billy Ray, will you join us?
Thank you so much for that introduction. And again, to reiterate, Carleigh, such a pleasure to be here with my fellow authors. I have some notes prepared, and I'm going to read from the collection. So Coexistence is a composite of portraits of Cree people in northern Alberta and Vancouver, which, surprise, surprise. Some are heterosexual, which is genuinely maybe a surprise. But most of them are queer. All are in predicaments that require them to decide what makes a meaningful life, what is worth surviving and what isn't. When I was writing the book, I was interested in contradiction, the many contradictions of having what the cultural theorist Avery Gordon calls complex personhood, which is the fact that we are full of meaning and also very straightforward, and that we desire things that sometimes contradict our values, or are sometimes at odds with each other, or who we see ourselves as. It seems important to me to insist on Indigenous complexity because the stories that have been told about us have relied on simplistic tropes and ideas. Indigenous complexity means that there is no single issue that we organize our social and political lives around. It means that we are both legible and illegible to ourselves and, of course, to others. Coexistence is about, how we coexist with the past and the present, how we try to coexist with one another across the divides of history, and how we try to coexist with ourselves, all of which feel, to varying degrees and on some days more than others, enormous undertakings. I'm not sure I offer up any solutions in the book, but rather possible lines of inquiry, possible dreams. To answer the question of how the book provokes is somewhat difficult in the context of this prize because I don't know what the jurors are thinking. But I thought I'd invoke the definition, which is to provoke is to call forth a feeling or an action, often ones that run counter to the usual order of things. By virtue of what I write about, queer, Cree people, sexuality, desire, the ugliness of history, I'm sure my books provoke quite constantly or simply. I hope my work troubles the status quo, troubles what one expects from an Indigenous book or from literature published in the country more broadly. I want my books to rest not on any preconceived notions of genre or plot, but on the possibility of being invited to share on the desire for another world. I'm going to read from a short story called Summer Research. My parents were on vacation. They'd asked me to house sit and to take care of their dog, a chocolate Labrador named Fudge they'd recently taken in from the reserve. That winter, they'd moved from the reserve to a small hamlet about 5 kilometers away. The house they lived in was built in the 1950s as a lodging for nuns who operated the Indian residential school in a valley down the road. Out of principle, I had stayed away. My mother claimed to have known about the house, but it was a relative who'd been forced to attend the school who conveyed its history to me. I called my mother when I found out, and she simply said that she'd smudged the space to cleanse it and that all was well. I'd struggled with the ethical dilemma of whether to visit until the summer, when I had no choice but to drive up from the city to finish research for my doctoral thesis on public memory. I was interested in how the violence of the 20th century lingered in people's lives today, both knowingly and unknowingly. I planned to interview locals as well as carry out a kind of experimental autoethnography, an examination of my emotional experience of the northern Albertan landscape. The house was bound up with this research. The hamlet was beside a large lake that was once a glacial deposit and later a hub of indigenous life and subsistence. In the last 2 decades, it had transformed from a sleepy enclave of locals to a bustling tourist destination. Several campsites and resorts now encroached upon the shoreline. My parents' house was a few meters away from the water, but it was directly across from an elementary school and thus mostly undesirable as a piece of real estate to the vacationers. Still, they paid exponentially more for it than they would have at the start of the century. Paying for property on one owns ancestral land was a paradox I still lost sleep over. I pulled into the driveway and at once the dog began howling. The house was situated in the middle of a small yard and beside it was a garage in front of which I parked. On the back door, I found a housekeeping note that alerted me to the location of the spare key as well as instructions for Fudge's care. My parents were driving to the Rocky Mountains. They would be gone for a week, just enough time to visit towns in both Alberta and British Columbia. They hadn't ever really gone on vacation before, so I was happy to lend my time and attention. I let Fudge out and he peed gently on the deck. He was a submissive urinator, demonstrating to me both his excitement and his passivity. He bared his teeth as a gesture of goodwill, and I gave him a few pats. He was medium-sized, stout, and had a stub of a tail. He had been run over as a pup, and his tail shattered. What was left wagged vigorously, nonetheless. Inside, I looked around hesitantly. I knew that the house had been renovated several times, but that its bones remained the same since its construction. The staircase in the middle was narrow and steep. It led to a floor with a bathroom and 2 small bedrooms connected by a narrow tunnel in the wall, an architectural feature of some mid-20th century homes, apparently, the purpose of which eluded me. I peeked inside and decided I hated the tunnel and would stay on the first floor to avoid it. I had no reason to be up there anyway. The bedroom I'd be sleeping in was a recent addition, next to the living area, on the ground floor. The room felt modern and somehow less haunted, but then again, I reminded myself, modernity was ridden with its own ghosts. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Billy Ray. I appreciate you sharing the definition for what it means to provoke, because I think every year we do this prize, it's probably one of the hardest for our jurors to decide, because we really get, and as you'll see tonight, we get every kind of book submitted for this, from poetry to graphic novels, short stories, and everything in between. And so, you know, what provokes is a very important question that we often have to answer when we're talking about this prize. Next, I am going to invite Christopher Cheung on the stage. Chris was a staff reporter at one of Canada's earliest online news sources, the Tyee. Previously at Metro and the Vancouver Courier, he is highly acclaimed for his reporting on urban culture, inequity, and life in Vancouver's diasporas. Among his many honors are 2 Jack Websters, BC's top journalism awards, and he holds a Master of Journalism from UBC. Come on up, Chris.
Great, thanks, Megan. It's an honor for me to be here as well. This is my first book, so I know a lot of my fellow nominees have a few under their belt. So yeah, it is very special for me. So as Megan mentioned, I am a journalist. I started at the Vancouver Courier in 2014, and then I spent some time at Metro afterwards. And I have to say rest in peace to both of those, because neither of them are around here today. And then I spent many years at the Tyee, and it's the only one that's not printed on dead trees, so I think that says something about the state of our media today. And my book is about race and representation in Canadian journalism. And it's a little bit about the behind the scenes of my time in the industry, some case studies from the headlines in the past few years, and also a little bit of theory as well. And this really starts from my childhood growing up here in Vancouver, so I'm going to take you there right now with a little bit of a reading. I have a hard time finding the Canada that I know in the news. Growing up, my teachers taught us that we lived in a multicultural country, but they didn't really need to because I could see that for myself. Every class I attended from kindergarten on was a miniature United Nations. Our daily attendance was an international roll call. Alam, Cheung, Nardi, Pabla, Racy, Tabora, Zhang. All of Vancouver is diverse, but my neighborhood of Oak Ridge was at a special crossroads of class and culture, straddling the posh west side and the blue-collar east side. I was born to a family from Hong Kong, and my classmates had roots from all over. Differences were everywhere. At recess, we shared a global selection of snacks, from tangy fruit leather to paper-thin roasted seaweed. When the school bell rang, parents and grandparents showed up to tell my friends to put on their coats in languages from Punjabi to Tagalog. The Cantonese church my family attended, in a building purchased from Mennonites, was just up the hill from a Sikh Gurdwara, where the city's Vaisakhi parade starts every year. On the walls of the living rooms in nearby homes were crosses and crocheted Bible verses, but also shrines and portraits of ancestors. Under these same roofs were families of every size and class. I'd visit friends who lived in mansions with their melancholy moms, supported by fathers who did business overseas, and those who lived humbler lives, spending their evenings at the family restaurant serving hot bowls of pho. My sense of a shared community only grew as I got older. Every time I walked the streets, took the bus, or visited another neighborhood, I came to understand more and more how the city I lived in was made up of people of different identities, which is why the local news frustrated so much when people of color were too often missing, misrepresented, and marginalized. Their lives revealed insights about society, everything from the cultural transformation of communities to the strength of our social safety nets. But were their stories being told? In time, I began to wonder which was worse, turning on the news and finding people of color and their experiences absent from the places in which they live, or seeing that journalists were recycling the same stories about people of color over and over again. And so we're in Vancouver today, and I think all of you coming here, we all know what Vancouver looks like as you walk around the street. It is a very racially diverse place. It's very culturally diverse. But as I read, when I looked at the news, I really felt that wasn't there. And so when I became a journalist, it wasn't so much that I really wanted to be a diversity champion and write a book with a title like this, but I really just wanted to see the reality that I knew reflected in the news. And so when I started to write stories, anytime I could get a person of color in the news, I'd be very excited and count that as a victory. So even if it was a comment about rush hour, if there was a racialized name in there, I'd get really excited. If they were a character in a story, that was even better. And if they were on the front page, that was a really, really big deal. I felt that there was a symbolic importance to having them on the cover, saying that they had something important to say. And it seemed that I was entering at a time when a lot of white editors did understand that this was important. This was right after Idle No More and Black Lives Matter. But then I started to see that the diverse stories that they were approving were very cheesy. So in my book, I talk about some of the stereotypical Ds of diversity coverage that I saw. I'm going to share 3 of them with you now. So there were a lot of stories that are called delicious stories. So stories about culture, stories about food and how it's exotic, secret recipes from a grandmother, holidays and what their origins are, heritage months, all of that. And I do love to write about that stuff too, but I think the problem was that a lot of the time it was written for an outside audience, as if they were tourists, and it was like an encyclopedia entry. And I feel like newsrooms can really fall into this trap, especially when doing what has been called calendar journalism, so only focusing on these big events, but not really covering the same groups the other times of the year. And another D that we get a lot of is stories about darlings, so model minority stories, a lot of people of color being heroes, working hard for long hours, keeping their heads down, and raising their families with a lot of sacrifice. and loving what Canada has to offer them. And I feel like these stories don't take it quite far enough. There is a lot to be celebrated, but there's a few things problematic as well. It does normalize a lot of things like never seeing your family. It normalizes physical jobs that could be unsafe, that they work for 7 days a week, and it normalizes assimilation as well. And if we have heroes, we have to have villains. So another D that I have in here is deviance. So it could be people of color committing crimes in the news, coverage about gangs, but there's also things that aren't criminal but could be viewed as deviant or nefarious. So people of color, when they're too numerous, they're viewed as a threat, they're viewed as an invasion in the news, or when they put up a lot of signs in their own language, like we saw in coverage of Richmond a couple of years ago, and being a threat to Canadianness. And when I started to notice this, I realized that before, when I got started, I really had a shallow metric of measuring what I thought was representation. I really just cared, yes or no, is there a person of color in this story? But I think it's important to ask other questions as well. Like, if there are racialized people in the story, are they being treated as different, as exotic, or even lesser? Do they show up in the same kinds of stories over and over again? Are they even interviewed in the story, or are they just talked about by other people? This is something that happens a lot. And is this a story that, if they're writing about a community, is this even a story that people from that community would care to read, or is it catered towards that outside audience? And we've talked about this prize about writing that provokes. So I think if I have one hope, it's that it will encourage anybody reading the news to ask these questions, particularly journalists. And there's a lot of newsrooms that are still really scared of answering these questions about diversity. And I feel that the ones that are starting to confront this problem, they might be solving it in superficial ways, like just hiring a person of color and leaving a beat for them to solve, but not really addressing the structural issues about what's wrong with journalism. And so this really is about what I wanted as somebody who reads the news. I do feel that representation in media, it does have a justice component to it, but it's also quite simply being a reflection of reality. And I'm going to end with a little quote here from Canadian Press, which is our national newswire. It says that our mission as journalists is to explain all of Canada to all Canadians, and I really hope that this book can help continue that conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chris. As a retired or reformed journalist myself, I have been digging through it, and I remember a time working for a news outlet where our producer would ask, does it tick all the boxes? And it was a lot of things that I won't even repeat here because it was that upsetting. Like, was there a woman in the story? Was there? And it was like, we would literally go through a checklist. So I'm really grateful to have a book like yours for us to read. Up next is Sarah Leavitt. Sarah is the author of the graphic memoir Tangles, a story about Alzheimer's, My Mother and Me, which was published by Freehand Books in 2010, which is currently in production as a feature-length animation, and the award-winning historical fiction comic Agnes Murderess, also published by Freehand Books in 2019. Sarah's latest graphic memoir, Something Not Nothing, is a finalist for the Eisner Award of Best Memoir. She is an assistant professor in the School of Creative Writing at the University of British Columbia, where she has developed and taught undergraduate and graduate comics classes since 2012. Come on up, Sarah.
I thought I had to do banter for 30 seconds. Am I close enough to the mic? I am so old that I remember when my friend worked at Little Sisters in 1993, and she maybe stole some gay comics for me. Sorry, Jim Deva, but yeah, maybe that's where it started. I don't know, but there was this whole series of comics called Gay Comics, which is a very creative title, but yeah, they were very revolutionary at the time. I encourage you to try to find them online. Anyway, hi. So I'll just talk briefly about the 3 questions that we were supposed to answer. Yes, I'm so happy to be here. I'm so happy it's not a competition where we are trying to be the most provocative. Yeah, so my book, Something Not Nothing, is a collection of short comics that I wrote in the first 2 years after my partner died. So my partner, Donamo, died in 2020. She had many long-term chronic health conditions, and they escalated at the end of her life. And she chose to have an assisted death, although, of course, that was a very constrained choice. She didn't really have any other choices at that point. So content warning, everything I read you will be about death. Why did I write this book? After she died, I really couldn't imagine, or before she died, I couldn't imagine that I would make any art after she died, even though I had been making comics before then. But I did. And for me, comics are the way that I explore and share what happens to me. I know, like, we often as writers talk about understanding things or making meaning, and that doesn't totally fit for me. It's more like, this weird thing happened to me and this is what it was like. It's like exploring strange territory, kind of, and then reporting back. Why is it provocative? Well, I don't know if your work checks all the boxes, but mine is, I'm just kidding. My response to, like, intense death stuff is to just make awkward jokes. So my book is about death and grief, and I think that parts of it are pretty raw and maybe things that we don't always talk about. I hope that it's very queer. More and more books and films and other works of art talk about assisted dying, but it's only been legal in Canada since 2016, so we're still kind of figuring out ways to talk about it. And also, they're just weird poetry comics, so maybe that's provocative, I don't know. So I'm gonna read you, I think it's 4 very, very short comics, and I'm gonna click things forward while still facing the mic, and we'll see. So this first comic is, so my partner died in April of 2020. And it's one of the first comics I made about a month later, and so it was right at the beginning of the pandemic, and we were all doing online workshops, and I went to an online workshop led by Teresa Wong, who's a fantastic cartoonist that some of you might be familiar with, who lives in Calgary, and she had us draw 4 things that we could see around us, because so many of us were spending most of our time inside. And so I took it as a prompt to write about things that reminded me of my partner who had died. And I'll just read it to you. So this isn't in the book. I don't think I said that. It's part of a whole pile of things that I wanted to put in the book that my trusted readers told me not to. But anyway, yeah. So the first thing is a succulent, and the text says, "A small sculptural succulent is what you asked for, even though we both knew they'd become a cliche. When I first met you, you were one of the only people, or maybe the only person I'd met who didn't like houseplants." That's so weird. That changed. This one had a place of honor in the window across from your bed. The next is The Summer Book by Tove Jansson. "You read this book at least 10 times and kept urging me to read it, but I didn't until I read it out loud to you in the last weeks. To discover books through each other, to delight in them together, a central way we loved each other." The third thing is a General Electric X-ray Corporation Circline illuminator, which you can put X-rays on to light them up. Okay, I think you stole this. I wish I could remember. I want to say it was in the hallway of an old hospital where you went for one in a long, long list of appointments. Is that true? She was kind of a badass. Garden basil. The important thing here is the label. It's the lid of a jar of dried basil we grew, empty now. There was another lid like this, and right after you died, I burst into tears at the sight of your handwriting and frantically scraped off the label. This one I'll keep. Even though I didn't exactly capture your handwriting here, it felt important to try. So then I'm gonna read you a few very short comics that are in the book. This is, I'm going to read you 3 pages from the first comic in the book, which is called Questions. Mostly my head is full of questions. In case you're wondering what it's like to go to bed alone and lie where she used to lie and try to sleep. How did she? How did we? What was she thinking when she? What was the last time she, time we, time I? Some of the questions might be answered in my journals. During the last weeks, I could only write in small booklets of folded scrap paper. The thought of recording any of this in a bound book, no. And I can't look at those booklets now. When she got up the last morning, went to bed the night before, made sure her hair, how? What about that moment before she left the house for the last time and she said, I'm sorry to leave you with such a mess. How did she even form the words? So this next page I won't read to you, but it's just me like playing with some of the wording from the eligibility requirements for an assisted death. And it says you must have a grievous and irremediable medical condition. You must be at a point where your natural death has become reasonably foreseeable. So this was before the recent change in legislation, but I'm sticking to 7 to 8 minutes. You do not need to have a fatal or terminal condition or a specific prognosis as to how long you have left to live. At this point, you are asking for cedar branches and cherry blossoms in your bed to hold on to breathe in. The first doctor came. She listened, maybe she held your hand, but she said no, she could not reasonably foresee. At this point, you were asking for cedar branches and cherry blossoms in your bed to hold on to breathe. Sometimes I would come into the bedroom and you'd be holding crushed flowers, broken twigs, desperately seeking comfort, escape from your bed. At this point, you were terrified. At this point, I was terrified. You wanted to find a way to stay. You wanted to stay. You were scared they wouldn't let you die. I wanted you to find a way to stay. I wanted you to stay. I was scared you would stay. So then I did I started using watercolors as I worked on these comics, and sometimes I would just fill panels with watercolor and just leave them there. So that was called Stare into Space. And then I'll read you 3 more pages. This is called Queer. The other night I was thinking about you and talking to you. I got very angry. It bubbled up and overflowed. Why did you let me fall in love with you? Why did you love me back? Why? Why did you leave me here? I remembered the night we met, May 1998, at a queer sex show at a strip club, you in this sort of 70s faggy glam outfit, glowing. I remembered November 30th, 1998, the night you said you loved me and the air was shimmering gold and my body dissolved. The joy of it, the peace, the brightness. I remembered your bright blue eyes and how it felt to be gazed at by you. One night you were half asleep trying to talk about the differences between us and how you felt about it. I really groove on the fact that you were a lipstick, you said, and then you fell asleep. It's Butch Femme in one line. We would recall that line with delight so many times. Oh, no, I can't find my last page. Just a sec. It all made me very angry, and I prefer not to think about it. So this is the last comic I'll read to you. It's called Year 2, Week 1, which is when I wrote it. Do not attempt to predict Year 2. You do not know this place. That's what the experts say anyway. If you see strange mountains ahead of you, or containers of, or weeping, or, in reality, you have no way of knowing. So, take a deep, try to stay in. Shh, because again, no one knows any. This coming year could be any or all of the possible. Just remember, everything is going to. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. All right, last but not least is Loghan Paylor. Loghan is a queer trans author who lives in Chilliwack. Their short fiction and essays have previously appeared in Room and Prairie Fire, among others. Paylor has a master's in creative writing from the University of British Columbia and a day job as a professional geek. The Cure for Drowning is their first novel. Come on up, Loghan.
Thank you so much, Megan. This is great. I also get a background, so. Oh, well, never mind. Yeah, as Megan said, this is my first novel, so I can't put into words what an honor it is to be here tonight along so many talented writers, one of whom was my professor at UBC too, so that is very special to me. So I have some short words that I want to read first, share with you, and then I'm going to do a short reading from my novel. So my book, The Cure for Drowning, is, I believe the marketing department settled on, a queer magic realist Canadian historical fiction novel. I have found it shelved in bookstores everywhere from fantasy to World War II history, so take that as you will. It starts in southern Ontario in 1939 with Kit McNair, the middle sibling of a poor Irish-Canadian farming family who dreams of a life beyond their rural community and rebels against the strict gender role society expects from them. When a new doctor moves to town, he brings his only daughter, Rebecca, a wealthy German-French-Canadian young woman who would prefer to attend university than get married. When Rebecca meets the McNairs, she is quickly drawn into the orbit of both Kit and their older brother, Landon, and the complicated love triangle that emerges threatens to tear their families apart until Canada declares war, sending each of them off on their own path into the wider world. There's also malevolent fae magic, queer parenting, Irish folklore, fighter plane dogfights, jazz clubs, and according to my mother, too many sex scenes, so read at your peril. I wrote this novel partly for my younger self, because it was a story I needed to read, but it didn't yet exist. So I realized I was the one who was going to have to write it, unfortunately. I also wrote this for my queer ancestors, to show how they lived full, interesting, and complex lives that were so much more than a footnote in a history book. But I think most of all, I wrote this novel because I was tired of reading books and consuming media in which trans people were portrayed as a tragic curse of nature, as half-formed things denied the fullest joys of family, love, and connection. I wanted to read a story where being queer, being gender nonconforming, being trans was a source of supernatural strength and courage, where it would be a good and right thing to live honestly, to love honestly, to be clear and true in our desires and ourselves, where those actions and those desires could be a form of powerful magic that changed the world. So in light of that, it should come as no surprise at all why my book is so provoking to certain demographics of our society. From the Christian nationalists to the World War II history bros, plenty of readers have made it clear to me that they don't appreciate my, quote, made-up gay history, or reading a, quote, woke revisionist version of World War II. And truly all I can say in response to that is, I'm so sorry you were misled into believing that trans people were invented on Tumblr in 2001. Because nothing could be further from the truth. Trans people have been and will continue to be a vital pillar of our collective society, whether those in power want to acknowledge it or not. That is the truth, and it will remain the truth. And to harken back to something Megan said at the opening of tonight's event, right now, as we gather tonight for this event, there are people in this country fighting to have these books and others like them ripped from store shelves, banned from libraries, and erased from school curriculums. No better time, then, to gather and celebrate everything they deem corrupt and show how much joy there is to be had in being ourselves and speaking the truth. So tonight, to close off, I'm going to read a short excerpt from part 1 of my novel. And in this scene, Kit and Rebecca have skipped out on their chores and responsibilities to spend the afternoon together at the river. August 1939. I stood in the river, my pants rolled to the knee. My hands were just under the surface, and the current tickled my wrists. A small shadow swam past my leg. I held my breath as it slowly moved between my palms, and then I lunged, quick as a cat. A tremendous splash, and the fish danced away into deeper waters. I swore. Rebecca laughed from her perch on a branch of the willow tree. She was leaning back against the trunk, a book in her lap, hair loose, her feet and legs bare. Our shoes lay forgotten on the bank. "Oh, I can't do it when you're watching me," I said. She lifted an eyebrow. "I'm beginning to think you can't do it at all." "I'm telling you, it works. It just takes patience." "And a fish to swim right into your hands." I flapped an arm at her. "You're scaring them. Go do something else." She stuck out her tongue, but she closed the book and climbed down from the tree onto the bank. A moment later, I heard a rustle and a splash as she waded to the other bank. I shook my head and rolled my shoulders. I'd been fishing like this since I was a child, but never with an audience. I was beginning to worry that I'd be punished for all of my bragging. It was a hot day. Every bit of moisture had been baked from the land, and the roads shimmered with false horizons. It was rare for Rebecca to turn up at the farm unannounced, but she'd appeared at the edge of the paddock just as Rat and I had returned from an errand in town. I'd hurried to put the horse away and slip away while my mother was napping inside. The heat had driven us to this shady bend in the river, where one bank was cool and shaded by the willows that leaned out over the water, and the other a series of flat rock shelves leading down to the river's edge, drenched in mid-afternoon sunlight. Another shadow, bigger and slower this time. I let my eyes unfocus, my fingers move like plants in the current. I was another tree with my roots in the river. One heartbeat, another. The fish swam closer. I struck, seizing it with both hands and flipping it onto the bank. I crowed with triumph and looked around for Rebecca, but she had vanished around the bend. I caught 2 more fish in quick succession and cleaned them all with my knife, leaving the innards for the hawks. I wrapped the flesh in burdock leaves and placed it under a stone in the river to keep cool. Then I lay back on the rocks to dry my clothes. The sun had tinted everything gold, the water flowing fast and clear a handspan from my feet. The shale was warm under my palms, the willows throwing blue-green shadows over the water. Rebecca waded back towards me, her skirt bunched in her hands. Her hair fell down her back, tangled from her explorations along the river. She came up the flat stone steps and sat next to me, leaving a trail of damp footprints. She leaned back on her hands, tilting her face up to the sky. I closed my eyes, the sun turning my eyelids a deep red. "I wish it could be like this forever," she said. "Like what, hiding in the forest with no shoes?" A damp foot kicked my ankle gently. "I mean so peaceful," Rebecca said. "I'm always calm when I'm with you, like this." My mother would say that's because I'm a daydreamer who doesn't know the meaning of hard work. There was a shifting of cloth. I opened my eyes. She had rolled onto her stomach and was propped on her elbows, looking at me intently. I swallowed. The sound of the river was loud between us. I could pick out the higher notes of the waterfall layered over the bubbling of the midstream. "Your mother doesn't know you like I do," Rebecca said, and touched my forearm with her fingertip. An ache spread from my chest down towards my stomach, stripping my breath. I was still, as still as I had been in the water, thinking myself a tree as the shadows moved between my legs. Then Rebecca leaned in and kissed me. She tasted like sweet clover and sunlight. The scent of the river clung to her skin, and the ache in my chest shattered into 1,000-bladed dandelion seeds, each lighter than a wish. The sunlight fell on us, around us, soaking into the rocks in the river and into us, alone and naked, beneath our clothes. Thank you.
All right, we need to give one more big round of applause for all 5 of our wonderful authors. And I just want to thank again to Vancouver Writers Fest and to the Vancouver Public Library for continuing to partner with us to do these wonderful events. Thanks again to all of you here for joining us, for not being hockey or soccer fans. Or maybe you are and you've been secretly looking at the scores. And thank you to everyone online for joining us. And I expect now, after hearing all these wonderful readings, you want to buy books. And lucky for us, Marianne is here from Book Warehouse, and all of our authors are sticking around to sign books. So if you want to buy a book, have it signed, chat with them a bit, feel free to do that over there. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us.